Text, there are three texts that are very similar. We have Francis August Wilson. We have Invincible Man, Ralph Waldo Ellison, and then we have Kate Bird by Maya Angelou. You see, all three texts do one thing, is to give us the experiences of the Black Americans in America. Black Americans experiences of Black Americans in America. And they say the same thing. If you look intently, what you find in all three texts is the same thing being said by all three authors. And interestingly, they all wrote at the same period. So that August Wilson knew Ralph Waldo Ellison, Ralph Waldo Ellison knew Maya Angelou, they knew themselves. So what they did was that they were going through a lot of things at particular points in their history, and they did well to capture it in their text. Okay, let me give us a backdrop to what was going on in America that made these guys write all the roads. Right? There's what is referred to as the Transatlantic Slave Trade. The only way for blacks to go to Europe and America is through the Atlantic Sea. Is that true? So how they were able to get slaves from Africa over to Europe or America was through ships that, plied the Atlantic Sea. They now call the people whose job was to go bring slaves from Africa, keep them in a place, and those who needed slaves to come and buy them. That's their job. So now the transatlantic slave trade got many Africans over to Europe and America, right? So when they got there, these people became slaves in the minefields. You know what the minefield is, right? That's where you get gold from. Remember that I put it to me. Tadio was killed in a minefield when they're trying to get gold illegally, remember? So that's what one of the jobs the Africans did. They were working in the minefield, and their job was to get gold and those precious metal from the ground, right? And that thing they did was they worked on sugarcane plantations. And that thing they did was to work on cotton fields. They would pick cotton. And if you've seen those people work in cotton fields, you find out that cotton has thistles. It has like thorns. So to cut them, if you're not careful. So that's the job they did. In America particularly, this is an American literature, right? In America, in the year 1st of January 1873, a man named Abraham Lincoln declared all slaves to be free. Please follow me. Abraham Lincoln declared all slaves to be free. It means that it was illegal to have a slave in America this particular year. The white man knew that if the blacks were left alone, what would happen? The blacks would dominate. If the blacks had the same privileges as the whites, they would dominate. What they did was they now put a law together. I've talked about that law, right? The Jim Crow law. They put a law together that what segregated the whites, the blacks. So that those days, the blacks and the whites cannot be in the same class. The black and the white cannot be in the same cinema hall. The blacks and the whites cannot be in the same house. Same school, the same boss. Neighborhood. If they stayed in the same neighborhood or all of that, they would have different places for the black and for the... And it's obvious that the whites stay in the lush place while the blacks... So that in the bus, the blacks are behind and their seats kept before the white would sit. That was the nature of things, right? So it was a law that was put together to make sure that the blacks are kept as what now? Kept as what now? Cage. Because they know they can fly. What do you do to a bird that can fly? Cage. So what they now did was they caged the bird, but they did not cage them physically most of the times. The cage was mentally. I don't know if you've seen that picture online of a horse that was tied to a chair. There was one picture of a horse tied to a chair. And the horse is a very powerful animal, a very strong beast. During war, they use horses because of its strength and its energy, right? A horse with so much strength like that can be tied to a rubber chair and the horse will not move because mentally the horse is caged. In the mind of the horse, that thing that is tied to is stronger than it. It's a mental thing. You see a human being in circles controlling elephant. Elephant sit down, elephant will sit down. What has happened to the elephant? It has been in the. Are we together? So what happened to the blacks in America? They were caged through a law called the Jim Crow law, and this law took effect in the year 1880. The reason why I'm taking you through this path is for you to appreciate this piece, so that when you are reading the text, you will now know where this guy is coming from. You will now know the reason why he's writing. You now know what was happening meant in the text. Why did he do this? Why did he do that? You will now find out because of this history. So in 1880, that was when in the 1880s, that was when the Jim Crow law was passed, and it now segregated the blacks and the white. It took the 1950s before look at it, from 1880 to the 1950s. How many years is that? That's 70 years. So for this particular period of time, the black man was kept. Do you notice that in Invisible Man? Do you notice? I don't know if you are from. If you read the text, they found a guy called Doc, that veteran doctor that was in Golden Bay, Big Hardy's shop, right? That Mr. Norton was, went to see, and without using any expensive equipment, was able to tell Mr. Norton his problem. And Mr. Norton, he concurred to what the doctor has said. When the doctor was telling him his story, he said he performed a surgery. The surgery was so successful, he was taken away from the city and beaten up. The reason is that black people should not have those kind of skills. Black people should work in the farm, should do hard labor, and not be so smart to cure a person. Do you get the case now? So from this 1880s to 1950s, there was segregation. But in the 1950s, the segregation began to reduce gradually. I don't know if you notice in the text that the racism in the South in Invisible Man was not the same as the racism in the North. Is that correct? When the narrator moved over to New York, do you notice he was moving closely with white people, and at the point in time he was feeling surprised at their reception. It was normal for the white and the black to relate. The South had a different system from the North. In the North, the blacks were freer than they were in the South. So in the 1950s, some of these laws that says a black should not do this, they began to win, they began to die gradually. Do you get it? So more into the 1960s, the law had almost subsided in America, right? It was at this period in the 1950s that Fences was written. And what you would find is that the main character of the text, by name Troy Maxson, he was born in the earlier part of this century. Okay, let me ask this question now. Which century does the 1950s fall into? Which century? Just wave. I know if you know the answer, use up your hand. What century is the 1950s in? 20th century, right? From 1900 to 1999 is 20th century. From 2000 to 2099 is 21st century. That's how we do it. We count it backwards. 20, 19, 19, 18, 18, 17. Do you see it? Do you get the idea now? So now, in the earlier part of the 20th century, Troy Maxson was born. During his time, the racism was so much in America that he never saw the blacks enjoying the rights that the whites enjoyed. So Troy Maxson grew up in the South, right? And he, from a very early age, he was a farmer because that was what the blacks could do. They were only allowed to work with their hands, right? They were only allowed to grow crops, do hard labor. Anyway, work with your hands. So he was a farmer in the South. At age 14, Troy Maxson leaves his family, leaves his father, right? Something had happened. What was that? Was that he went to this farm and there was this lady that he had an eye on. And so he was having an affair with this lady. And in the process, his father comes, takes a leather belt and then flogs him. And the father now begins to have an affair with that lady that he. So seeing his father do that, he took that belt, and flogged the father. That was the last time he was at home with his father. So he left home, and a 14 years old does not have enough to face the world, right? So he entered into a life of crime, and in the process, he met a lady. We don't know the lady's name. The lady gave birth to Leon, right? So now he now had several mouths to feed, right? He took his knife one day to go rob. In the process, the person who was to go rob was a white man. He had a gun. He shot at Troy, but Troy was able to kill him. Troy did not die. Troy was now arrested and he went to prison. It was in prison he met Bono, his friend Bono, right? Upon leaving the prison yard, he got married to Rose, and he was the husband of Rose for 18 years. In the process of that period, Rose gave birth to Corey. In the 18th year of their marriage, Troy comes to Rose and he tells Rose that he got a girl, right, by name Alberta. And the reason was because he felt he had been in one place for too long and he wanted to enjoy the spice of life. You know, they say variety is the spice of life. So he wanted to see things from different perspective, and then he got Alberta, right? Follow me. Alberta now gives birth to Renell, right? What you will find out is that Alberta died during delivery, right? The time Troy tells Rose about Alberta, it broke their relationship because he felt betrayed. Rose felt betrayed by the news. I've given you 18 years of my life, and the best way to repay me is by having an affair outside. So it broke. They were not in talking terms in that particular period, right? And when Renelle was born, Alberta had died at this time. Troy now brings the child home. Rose, being the graceful wife that she is, accepts Renelle as a part of the family, right? Troy has a brother by name Gabriel. Gabriel was a soldier officer, and during a particular war, a metal plate exploded, and he sustained a mental injury. So he was partially insane. And so you will see him with a trumpet. He saw himself as the archangel Gabriel, that he will be the one to blow the trumpet at the end of the age for the saints to go yonder. Okay, Troy and Corey never saw eye to eye. Troy back in the days was a baseball player, but Corey was a football player, right? So he played football. While playing football, he was so good that one recruiter from Massachusetts, that's a state in America, right? Came over to the text was written in a place called where? Pittsburgh. All of the place of what's his name? Of August Wilson are written in Pittsburgh because that's where it stays. So it happens to be the setting of all his place. So the recruiter left where now? He left Massachusetts over to Pittsburgh to come recruit Corey. But Troy refused. The reason was because he felt that things were the way it was back in the day, where the blacks were not allowed to play with the whites. And not wanting his child, Corey, to face the humiliation that his race faced, then he refused Corey from being signed by that football recruiter. Instead, he told Corey to go and work in an A&P store. This is a grocery store because he felt that the black man should work with his hands. Right? He had a problem with his first son, Leon. The reason was because Leon, instead of doing hard labor, he was a musician. And he felt that the music, and he was not only a musician, he was a jazz musician. That was the period jazz became music in America. Jazz music is music without voice. It's just musical instruments. Just musical instruments, right? And he was used to R&B. That's how they grew up. R&B and soul. It's the one you sing about your experiences. Sing about what's going on in your life. But in jazz music, just have an instrument playing and playing and playing. There's no sound in it. So he calls the music Chinese music. And he will not support his son. He felt the black man must labor with his hands for him to make ends meet. And his sons were ready to labor with their hands. Corey chose football. Leon chose music. And so he did not accept it. He wanted to get Leon's a job in his company. He worked as a garbage collector. Yes. The reason was because he felt that the black man should work with his hands, right? So he dies. Troy dies, and Corey now, there was the fight between Troy and Corey before their deaths, right? Corey felt that the father hated him. He would not sign his the form for him to be recruited by the football club. He would not allow him to do the things he wanted to do. So he felt that the father was against him. So what he did was, one time he picked a fight with his father. It was so aggressive that it almost resulted into death of one of them, Troy and Corey. So he left the house. He only returned back when Troy died. We are not told. We were just informed that Troy died. What killed him? So he slumped and he died. Whether it's heart attack, whether it's heartache, whether it's stroke, we don't know. Whether it's village people, we do not know. But the guy slumped and he died. So on his funeral, Corey comes back as a soldier officer, right? And he refuses to go to Troy's burial because he felt that Troy never wanted his good. While Troy was alive, they never saw eye to eye. So why will it now be that at his death that they will now see? So he refused. It was now Rose that now came and talked to him that his father did all he did, not because he hated him, but because he saw things from he belonged to the older generation that saw the racial discrimination in America, right? So he's not aware that things had changed and the blacks now enjoy the same rights as the whites. The play was written in the year 1957. So that was the point where there was now freedom for the blacks. But this guy was so fixated in the olden days that he did not know that time had moved.